Hey, thank you for joining me for this talk on bee lawns. And I know earlier I might have said this is a two-part. I've decided to make this a three-part talk because part two got a little long. But at any rate, in the first part, we're going to talk about what are bee lawns and why we want to create one. And let me just say that in part two, we're going to look at how we do that. And in part three, I'll give you an example of an experiment that I ran with my own yard. Let me also add that in the beginning of part two, if you already have an existing lawn but you want to do something, there's a simple way that you can do that, and that's addressed in the beginning of part two. So anyway, with that, let's get into it. So what are bee lawns? Well, bee lawns are simply lawns with a mix of grass and perennial flowering plants that are used to benefit the pollinators. So instead of just grass alone, they mix in several flowering plants, most commonly a low-growing clover, like Dutch white clover, creeping thyme, self-heal are the most common. And they're mixed in with a low-growing fescue or a bluegrass so that you're providing more than just grass. But the key here is that these flowering plants all can produce flowers fairly low to the ground. Now, in the previous slides, you saw pictures of bee lawns before they were mowed. So just so you could see the flowers. So keep in mind that the flowers will be within the grass, may not be visible from a distance. But what I want to do first is look at the standard grass lawn and look at some of the benefits of that, but then also how can we increase the benefit by adding flowers to our lawn to make it a pollinator or bee lawn. Well, we know lawns have a number of benefits. If you look at the categories by the National Park Service, they say number one, there's environmental reasons. They reduce erosion. Well, sure, if you have bare soil, there's going to be erosion. There's probably going to be erosion even if you have a lawn, but it's going to greatly reduce that. And the other thing is these are photosynthetic plants, right? Grass is photosynthetic, so it is going to give off oxygen. Secondly, a nice kept lawn is very aesthetic. And it also, lawns provide living space. We want to recreate, want to play ball, we want to have a barbecue. And thirdly is if you have a well-kept lawn, it really improves your property value of your home. But let's look at lawns. According to the National Wildlife Federation, they say they've estimated that there's about 40 million acres of grass, of lawn in the United States. That's about 2% of the land mass. That's pretty phenomenal. And so what's happening is as our cities and towns get bigger and spread further and further, we're cutting into the forest more and more, or we're cutting into the prairie more and more. And so lawns are increasing in size. So if here you look at this new development, in the last picture we saw cutting into the forest, here farmland is being sold for housing developments. And the question I raise is, do we need all this lawn? So what do we know about lawns? Well, as you saw in an earlier picture, it's just one crop. It's a monoculture. So there's very limited habitat there. There's very little vertical diversity. We mow it pretty low. Okay, ants might live in there, some other insects, of course, bacteria and stuff in a good soil. So with limited habitat comes very little diversity. There's not a great diversity of life in or above the grass. And in addition, by cutting into the forest and cutting into farmland, prairies, etc., we lose habitat, native habitat, natural habitat. So the question is, do we need all this lawn? Again, we have the monoculture limited habitat, habitat loss, no diversity, but also you're mowing, so there's energy use, there's water consumption to irrigate, and there's chemical use. A lot of people use chemicals to keep out the weeds and to fertilize. Also, there's not much for shade. So let's look at some of the benefits of either reducing or converting the lawn and see what benefits we get out of that. Well, first of all, if you're planting trees or shrubs on top of or within the lawn, you're automatically, because of the vertical stratification and different types of trees and shrubs, particularly native trees and shrubs, then you're going to be increasing the insects that are there and eventually creating wildlife habitat. So biodiversity really jumps up. And in a future talk, we will look at some of the experiments that have been done in Delaware, Pennsylvania area with converting farmland or lawns into trees and shrubs and see how much biodiversity we get. Secondly, according to the EPA, 30 to 60% of urban water use, okay, that's where you have a water system, you're getting it from the town. 30 to 60% of urban water use is to water lawns. That's incredible. And for those that live in the desert Southwest, there's very little water, and in fact, I think in many towns, putting in a grass lawn is illegal. You can't do that by zoning ordinances. Here's an example of a place in Illinois, a big corporate office, and you can see that they've done a pretty good job of maintaining the forest area. They do have some lawn, but notice there's a lot of forest areas surrounding and within their campus. It's over when you get past the parking on the far right. You can see that lawn looks really green. I've cut off some of it, otherwise the picture would be too small. Probably having a hard time seeing it as it is. And it looks like clearly they fertilized that. But at any rate, a little bit better job of trying to preserve habitat around. So that's beneficial to wildlife, to bees even. And so the less lawn you have, you're going to have a cost savings from less fuel, less mowing, and hopefully less chemical use. All right, so let's go back to this home that has these beautiful plantings with azaleas and dogwood and other things and trees. And obviously, nice plantings like this are definitely going to increase your property value. But there are other benefits to consider with these kind of plantings. And that is that trees and shrubs, in addition to providing habitat and such, provide privacy. They provide protection from the wind. They provide insulation in the summer by shading your buildings. So there are a lot of benefits to consider of doing other kinds of plantings, and particularly when we're talking about bee lawns, it's really about floral resources for our pollinators. So where can we use bee lawns? Well, anywhere there's lawns. And in this image, you can see a neighborhood with a bunch of lawns. Every house practically has a lawn. So imagine all this habitat providing habitat, floral resources for pollinators, especially the bees. Okay, now in all fairness, you're going to say, hey Dave, I have kids, I don't want them running around barefoot in the backyard and stepping on a bee. And having done that myself multiple times as a kid, I get it. So that doesn't mean that your front lawn or a portion of your lawn where it's fenced off could be used. So there's options out there. There are public spaces like this courthouse lawn. The school, the local school's property, easily converted to bee lawns. New construction areas, whether big or small, you could plan in a bee lawn. Again, using a low-growing fescue, you're going to be mowing less, and then with a bee lawn, you're going to be providing a lot of pollinator habitat. And solar farms, we see them going up everywhere, but imagine with a bee lawn, you might only have to mow this once a year just to keep the trees out, and that to me seems like an ideal location for bee lawns. I was going to add highways to this list, but I'm a little on the fence. Like the median strip, for example, seems to me you're just setting up a kill zone for bees traveling through heavy traffic. But in those periphery areas, especially in highways where the state or usually it's a state or it could even be the feds that own the property outside, there's a lot of areas where this could be applied. And there's a lot of new construction going on right now. So anyway, it's another thought, but we'd have to really be careful because highways can also be death traps. Finally, I want to mention golf courses. There may be other things. Perhaps you're thinking of something. Please jot me a note if you have other ideas. But somewhere around golf courses, there's got to be areas where we can incorporate bee lawns. And so let me end by talking about the benefits again. Yes, aesthetics, and a regular lawn has aesthetic value as well, but it can be very aesthetic. Some people like the colors of the flowers in there. Anyway, less mowing is a possibility, especially you're using low growing or no grow fescue. Definitely you've increased the floral resources, so you've increased that habitat for foraging by pollinators. And in a sense, you've increased the biodiversity, and at least it's providing floral habitat, if not other types of habitat for pollinators. And the pollinators greatly benefit from this. So that's the whole purpose, really, right? So the bees, and again, I'm a bumblebee guy, so for me, this is very beneficial to the pollinators, especially the bees. So thank you for listening. I hope this intrigued you a little bit and maybe might entice you to think about incorporating a bee lawn into your lawn. Next time, part 2, we will look at how to establish, how to maintain a bee lawn. With that, thank you. Take care.